This is the Tennessee Native Plant Society monthly seminar, third Tuesday of each month. And tonight is Tuesday, January 20th, 2026. And our speaker tonight is Mary Priestley. And so I'd like to introduce her now. Mary and I had a big conversation earlier, and she doesn't necessarily want me to go on and on about all her accolades, but honest to goodness, it's quite a long list. Mary is a teacher, an educator, an author, an editor, a lecturer, a naturalist, and she is a botanist by training. Mary has been with TNPS for many years, and she is a past president. And one of her interests was with the Friends of South Cumberland State Park, and which eventually was changed by the state of Tennessee, divided up into three separate parks. But Mary has a deep connection to she knows about the state parks and the natural assets that the state parks make available to everybody. And right now, she is an associate with the Suwannee Herbarium, and she is the editor and illustrator for the newsletter for the Suwannee Herbarium. And she is the author of, like I said, many books, and one of them is a children's guide to wildflowers that is offered by TNPS, Tennessee Native Plant Society. So if you're interested in taking a look at that book, that's available through our website. But Mary, if you are ready to start, I think we can go ahead. And Mary says it's okay to ask questions during her talk. And in addition, once we get near the end of the hour, I will you can put questions in the chat, and we can go over them and take questions at the end as well. And I'll just let Mary begin.
There we go.
There we are.
Okay.
And now select slideshow. And
Yeah. Let me see if I can get that out of the way. Slideshow. There we go. Sorry, everybody. Slideshow. There we go. Okay. Smooth as silk. All right. So I was talking to Mitchell Kent, and I was telling him that I really would love to talk about Mack Prichard. And we talked a little bit about it, and Mitchell said, it would really be great to talk about Mack and Tennessee State Parks. And it's a great connection, and certainly Native Plant Society is very interested in the state parks, and so I thought sounded good to me. Here's a wonderful quote from Mack. I'm going to read a lot of this to you, and the reason is that they're quotations from people that I would like to have you hear and read just as they are. So Mack said at one point, in the years to come, if we do not save adequate reserves of parks and forests, there will be no place for our native plants and animals to hide from our juggernaut of progress. This is the way he talked. I'm sure some of you knew Mack, and he had a huge following, including me. This is a small group that went down into Savage Gulf one day several years ago. That's me in the white shirt. The fellow on the far right quit smoking that very day, and I don't blame him. It was quite a haul. Just a little bit of background about the state parks. When the National Park Service was put together, they formally or informally kind of surveyed the United States and realized that there were absolutely hundreds of places that could be made into national parks, and that they were not prepared to create all those national parks. So in the 1920s, they put together a conference to promote the individual states to create their own parks. So our park system grew out of that conference that was put on by the National Park Service in the 20s. These are pictures of CCC guys. Several Tennessee state parks originated from TVA land and were built or developed by CCC labor. And of course, this was a Depression era um, phenomenon that FDR came up with to pay these young men aged 18 to 25 $30 a month, and they were allowed to keep $5 of it and send 25 of it home. And they were engaged in doing a lot of environmental work. These two photos were taken in the Smokies. The stonemasons on the left were working on some of the overpasses and bridges that they're still the beautiful construction that's still there. The WPA was another one of these Depression era um, uh, ideas of FDR's Works Progress Administration, and that it was meant to put a lot of people to work. I've picked up this book, The Scenic Resources of the Tennessee Valley, a few years ago, paid way too much for it in a used bookstore, but I'm really glad I've got it. And it was written by all these writers who needed a job during the Depression. And it goes through all these perfectly beautiful places in the Tennessee River Valley. This is 2 pages that I scanned. One is photo of Raven Point and description of that, which is in Fiery Gizzard. I know a lot of you probably been there. It's in my backyard practically. And then Foster Falls also in Fiery Gizzard. The next page has got a photo of Foster Falls, as it quite often looks. Foster Falls is a great place for botanizing, and I really got a kick out of this last paragraph, which I doubt if you can read. On that middle one, it says, in view of the general wilderness character, they were hoping that you could get rid of the power line that runs right across, right parallel to the top of Foster Falls. Well, that is a botanist's dream area. I have botanized there several times, and the biodiversity, I don't see how they keep the biodiversity of herbaceous plants going there the way they do. But anyway, this book goes on to say that 8 miles out of Tracy City on an unimproved dirt road, you can get there, and it's a really great place to visit. So Mitchell Kent, I'm not sure why he sent me this picture the other day, but this is a photo that Mack Prichard took. Um, Obviously much more recently. This is a same place, Foster Falls, when it's really been raining and the water is just thundering over the top of it. Um, but it was a place that Mack loved to visit. And another quotation from him about the parks, the state parks. Parks are the lungs, the breathing places for our people. I love the way that metaphor there. As uncommitted open space, they are the most valuable land we can pass on to future generations. We cannot afford the continued loss of such unique natural and historical areas, for there are no replacements. Beauty has no substitutes in our lives. And that he carried through the idea of aesthetics and beauty, really in the larger sense, not only in the sense of pretty appearances and so forth, but he really had a deep connection to the idea of beauty as it connects as a thread that connects all of us. So he was associated with creating or developing all of these state parks. And if you look down through them, you'll see places I know that you visited. My state park, South Cumberland, is there. A bunch more. it's people say more than 20 parks or 25 parks, some really, really huge number that Mack got going. The very last one down there, Cummins Falls State Park, actually was number 54 in of our state parks, of which we have maybe about 60 right now. It's hard to say exactly how many, but that became a state park actually after Mack had retired. Um, but they named the visitor center in his honor, and they've got really honestly because he was so connected to the Cumberland Plateau, the park manager got a huge slab of sandstone from the top of the plateau and put it in at Cummins Falls as a tribute to Mack and how much he loves the Cumberland Plateau, which of course we really appreciate. Here's a map. This shows 23 state parks and that he was involved in creating and developing. So this is close to my home. Um, Governor Winfield Dunn, who was governor in the early 70s, 71 to 75, they say it's not what you know, it's who you know. And I might also say it's also who you're related to. Betty Dunn was a Prichard. She was Mack's first cousin. Mack was already working in the Department of Environment and Conservation when Governor Winfield was elected governor, but they got along beautifully and got a whole lot done. The State Natural Areas Act was passed in 1971, which is the first year that Governor Dunn was governor. Now, this is a picture from a famous trip, famous to me anyway, down into Savage Gulf. Mack had talked Governor Dunn into going down into Savage Gulf to see about the possibility of making it the first state natural area under this new act. Now we can duke it out with the Friends of Radnor Lake about, who was first. We were first, and um, I everybody says it. The photo in the very front, the back of the head of Elsie Quarterman, who the Tennessee Native Plant Society gave an award to just short of her 100th birthday. The man on the left in the front is from the National Park Service. Herman Bagenstos is on the right in the front, and they're headed down into Savage Gulf on an old logging road. Here, Dunn's tenure as governor in the early 70s saw a 50% growth in the number of Tennessee state parks. And of course, that was really virtually all due to Mack. As Governor Dunn said, Mack convinced me to visit the virgin timber at the heart of a potential wilderness area in Savage Gulf. I was impressed enough to push through acquisition 2 years later to establish the Savage Gulf State Natural Area. This is another couple of pictures from that same trip. They started in on horseback. Looks like a springtime picture, doesn't it? And then the picture on the right in color is from way down in, that's about as far down as you can hike in Savage Gulf. I think that's some of the white water from Savage Creek there under the governor's arm there. But that is an iconic yellow poplar tree that's way on down there and that they're posing with. That's Elsie Quarterman on the far right and the fellow from the National Park System in the middle. Mack was also not only interested in land conservation, which he did a tremendous about, but also water conservation. Here's a quotation from him about these rivers that throughout our state. The duck, which we are going to visit, the Native Plant Society in May, runs right across the middle of the state, you can see. I want to point out also far over on the right, coming in from North Carolina, the Tellico, which is really the river over which Mack had his huge defeat. The Tellico Dam was, I think, the big defeat of Mack's career. But anyway, he was a founding member of the Tennessee Scenic Rivers Association. And I love that at that very first meeting, he suggested the name scenic so families would not fear losing their kids in the wild. Um, I've got a typo in this next quotation, but he quoted Lauren Isley and said, if there is magic on this planet, it is contained in water. And it is water which of all things is most yielding. I left that out. Which of all things is most yielding and yet wears away the hardest stone. Water which is always changing, yet always the same. Water which to the Indians was another word for life and the source of the variety of this state we enjoy. And he goes on to describe, the variety of the topography um, and the soils and so forth, all of which depend on water. This is in an essay that actually it was a speech that he wrote, Traveling Tennessee with Raindrops to the Sea. This is another picture from that hike, that very first picture that I showed you of the hike into Savage Gulf. We made it down to the iconic yellow poplar tree, and there's Mack with that. I have not been down there since the tree fell, but apparently it it is no more. But who is this guy? I mean, obviously he's a personal hero of mine, but if you have not heard of him, you may be impressed to learn that Governor Bredesen, one of our governors, through a Senate resolution, named him the Conservation Conscience of Tennessee. This was through a Senate resolution. Then when Mack retired in 2008, he was deemed Tennessee's State Park Naturalist Emeritus. He never was actually Tennessee's State Park Naturalist, but he's been succeeded now by Randy Hedgepath and Roger McCoy, both of whom have that designation, Tennessee State Park Naturalist. So it's really kind of a neat thing that they started and started really for Mack. Talked about how he was involved in founding so many state parks and natural areas, was a member of over 50 conservation organizations, founding them, and has been called Tennessee's John Muir. John Muir also had a really terrible defeat in the Hatch Hatchie Dam in not Yellowstone, but the other one. And it was a defeat that I think parallels Mack's defeat in the building of the Tellico Dam. Mack, this is a little bit about his life. I can't overstate the importance of a mentor or a supportive adult, supportive parent. If you think back on your interest in conservation or plants or science or environmental issues, I'll bet you can come up with somebody in your past who was a mentor or supporter of your efforts and helped you move on. Matt grew up in Dyersburg, and then they moved to Memphis when I think he was a teenager. He worked at the Chucalissa Indian Village, which was administered by the T.O. Fuller State Park. He was involved in some digs there. He was really interested in Indian temple mounds, and as his big sister, Jerry, said, I was more than a little embarrassed when he would walk the streets of downtown Memphis in Indian moccasins. I realize that this Indian is a dated term now, but anyway. He would walk the streets of downtown Memphis in Indian moccasins with an Indian blanket around his shoulders, but Mack was not ashamed to call attention to the area's early residents. Um, when he was 16 years old, he learned of a mound, an Indian mound in Arkansas, the owner of which was prepared to sell the mound to the State Highway Department in Arkansas for use in fill for a new state highway. So they were going to take it apart and use the soil as fill. There was a public meeting, and Mack went over there. His dad drove him over there. Mack had all these notes, and apparently he was perspiring so profusely that he drenched his notes. And so he was without notes, stood up, all nervous, and made the case for not taking down the Indian mound for highway. When it was over, he felt like he had just really messed up and he was just so embarrassed. And it turned out, though, that the owner of the land was actually in the audience, came up to Mack, the 16-year-old boy, and said he had convinced him that this Indian mound needed to be preserved. And it was just a huge triumph for this young man. And I don't know if there was anything else that was parallel going up to that, but everyone points to that moment when he really realized that if he could put his heart into something he really believed in and articulate it clearly enough, he could bring people around. Um, and it was a life-changing moment. So he went on. He worked under Governor Frank Clement in the 60s. Um, there were, I think the park system at that point had 17 state parks in it, and they added about 10 during Clement's time. Clement had a statement that Mack loved to quote, "Tourists are easier to pick than a bale of cotton and worth a lot more." Not to say anything bad about agriculture, but they realized that tourism was and preservation of these special places was really good for the state and for the state economy. Governor Dunn came in 71, and he asked Mack to be the first state archaeologist, which Mack was really reluctant to do because he had really felt like had found a home in the environmental end of things and parks and so forth. But he did do that, and threw himself into it, established a number of archaeological parks during his tenure. In 72, he attended the first UN conference on human environment in Stockholm. And that was, I think, a key moment for him. He came home and um, uh, what was it? Think globally, act locally. That came out of that conference, and he used that phrase a good deal. He was involved in routing I-40 around the old growth in Memphis at the Overton Park. If you look at the map, you can see where you have to take a 90-degree turn there to get around that park. Those people, those Memphians, took that to the Supreme Court and won, which I think may be a unique experience in the history of the Supreme Court. But Mack was a spearhead of that. So excuse me. So here he is giving a slideshow, and oh golly, I think that's a beautiful photo. Um, uh, Telling stories. He's got his carousel there and telling stories to us. This is a group of friends of South Cumberland. You might recognize John Evans there in the very middle, standing up in the back. He was our keynote speaker last year at our annual meeting. Some of you may have known Harry Yateman and Jean, who were over on the couch. way far left is Mary Davis, who's a long-time member of the Native Plant Society. But anyway, here he is in our living room, showing us slides and having a great time. Um, Little did we realize that he was doing this everywhere. We thought he was ours. Um, but no, he was all over the state. His former supervisor told me one time, the first time I gave a program on state parks, it was at a meeting in Johnson City, up in the far upper eastern part of the state. I went into the meeting with my carousel of slides and met Mack coming out. Sorry to be in such a rush, but tonight I've got a program in Memphis, he said. Anytime he could go get the message out, he would go. And he really and truly was phenomenal. And then John Froschauer said, and John is one of his, uh, John is a wonderful environmentalist. I know he has done programs for the Native Plant Society for these seminars, and very articulate and very wonderful writer. So here's what John had to say. Presentations, these carousels, these slideshows. Presentations were painstakingly assembled and, like medicinal Navajo sand paintings, were often quickly dismantled only to be rebuilt for the following evening's show, which might be clear across the state. Using a slotted piece of wood set on his dashboard, Mack would sometimes put them together while behind the wheel en route to the program site. That's what John said. Bob Fulcher, who is another wonderful environmentalist who is retired now from working for TDEC, talked about Mack's facility in putting people together. He was a real people person and could really put people together. Mack's facilitation of mergers between recreationists and environmental advocates brought protection to spectacular critical resources. His tally is unequaled for hands-on accomplishments through midnight rides, inspirational photography, straight talks, and the power of positive mergers. So this is a couple sentences from the book that I put together, and Bob wrote a reflection. Randy Hedgepath, who I know many of you know, and he followed Mack as a state naturalist. Mack told me many times that there's a lot of gloom and doom we need to know about, but to hold people's attention, a bit of humor or an amazing fact should be added in the text or talk. Things we could do to help should also be there so the audience would feel inspired to go out in the world with a purpose and determination, a call to action. And there's Randy being Randy. Ann Tidwell, who was for a long time the president of the Friends of Radnor Lake, and she's sitting there with Norm Mead, who is a very active person with the Friends of Radnor Lake, and was on my editorial committee for this book that I wrote, or edited rather. Ann said once Mack was actually fired for insubordination, which is not hard to believe because he had his own ideas about what he ought to be up to. Later, he told me they can fire me, not pay me, take away my office, but they cannot stop me from speaking the truth to everyone who will listen. I have never known anyone as driven as Mack Prichard was, truly. And this slide here, it's really quite a responsibility to characterize somebody that you admire to this extent, and show these PowerPoints around and tell people what he was like. But I do honestly believe that this is where he came out of. He believed in the sacredness of the land, the importance of caring for God's creation, and he didn't mind preaching about it. He was very much interested in both our natural and our cultural heritage, especially indigenous peoples. He had a deep respect for fellow human beings. I have been told that walking on the streets of Nashville, he would call uh, beggars brothers. Hey, bro, hey, bro, hey, brother, and give them whatever he had in his pocket. Um, he was really interested in the importance to human beings of natural areas in which to roam, and that's really important. I remember when we were putting together a, a big fundraising effort, and we had a little book, that went along with it, with photos in it. And he said, be sure and put people in your pictures. People want to see other people enjoying these areas. Don't just put pretty pictures in, put people in your pictures. And then again, beauty. He was a believer in the importance of beauty as a common thread that binds us all together. He disliked several things, including what he called the juggernaut of progress, what he called popolution, pollution from population, channelizing streams, damming rivers, and clear cutting forests. He was opposed to all of those. He died in 2020. And it was about a year before he died that he and his niece and sister put together a foundation, Mack S. Prichard Foundation, and invited people to be on the board. I think he realized that he still had a lot to say, and really wanted to be sure that his legacy was not forgotten. So I was on that group, and uh, there were people who were working to clean out his house and gather his materials and all. And I wasn't about to drive up to Nashville and do that. Um, but I thought that since I had been involved in writing some books and editing one anyway that I had just edited, that maybe I could work on compiling Mack's writings into an anthology. And I think the thing that gave me the nerve to do it was a comment from Mack one time. I had asked him about quoting him for something else, and he just said, "You're the wordsmith." And I guess I never forgot it. And I thought, well, you know, I think he would trust me to do this. And so I offered to do an anthology of his work. And boy, did he have a ton of stuff to work with. He saved copies of his letters. He saved copies of his interoffice memos, of the articles that I wrote, of the speeches that he gave, essays, notes. He always carried these little pocket-sized spiral notebooks with him. He had tons of those. He took tons of pictures. See his little teeny scribbly handwriting? Um, anyway, there was just an awful lot of stuff, and it was really something to go through. So you take all that stuff, and then you take a lot of admirers, including John Froschauer and a number of people who went through, collected his materials, sorted through them, sent me lots and lots and lots of stuff. Can you use this? Can you use this? Um, and I had help in arranging these things. I had a great editorial committee. I would say, oh gosh, these are such fabulous angry letters that he's writing to TVA. We have to put them all in. And these people would say, no, 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 Mary. We need one angry letter to TVA. We need one angry inner office memo. That's enough. So then we would have to choose from those. So it the book does not contain all of his work by any stretch of the imagination. But I had some great help with that. I invited several people to write reflections, and so there are 5 or 6 or 7 reflections from key people with whom he worked. Latham Davis, who's a long time Tennessee Native Plant Society member and past board member, was the designer. And I'm just really proud of this little book. Um, and then another thing, I had to characterize um, him, and I divvied up his his life into five different categories, and that took a lot of nerve. I'm sure that it could be done a different way by someone else. But the first category I called man of faith and family. And because I really do believe that was his bedrock, his faith and his family were his bedrock, and he everything he did came out of that. This little note to his parents, I was able to reproduce and put in the book. This is a note that he sent them along with clippings describing his famous stand in Arkansas to save the Indian Mound. So this is a 16-year-old boy. My dearest mother and dad, thanks to you both, I got the right loving start on life to be able to do what is listed here in these clippings. God bless you both, and thank you, always for what you mean to me. With much love this Easter season, Christ has risen indeed, and all creation blooms with life. Love from Mack. And then he described himself as an environmental evangelist in an interview for the Tennessean in 1989. And he defined that as a way of saying that conservation is the essence of stewardship. The Bible teaches it, yet we've turned Mother Nature into a sewer. We've forgotten that we are not only our brothers and sisters keepers now, but of future generations as well. Greed is killing us. The earth can provide for our need, but not for our greed. The second section, which is really kind of a hodgepodge, I've got a piece that he wrote, which I think was to become a master's thesis. He also wrote the chapter on interpretation in the Tennessee State Parks operational manual. There's a lot in there about how to interpret nature for the public, and then some of the internal memos that he wrote trying to get the department to go the way he wanted it to go. Um, and then these quotations from this chapter: maintaining parkland is half the job. Helping the public to best enjoy it is the real task of nature interpretation. Over 100 years ago, Thoreau prophesied that in wildness is the preservation of the world. The basic role of state parks is to provide these vitamins of wildness. Vitamins of wildness. I love that. Trails beckon to the greenhorn and woodsman alike to come in and discover their secrets. Trails are thus the most basic park development, and they yield that premium experience, solitude. Another section is storyteller. He was quite a raconteur. This is from an article that he wrote for the Tennessee Conservationist on Savage Gulf. The saving of the Savage Gulf's natural area is a great accomplishment. What remains is to comprehend its true meaning. This green oasis offers to the weary soul a refuge from urban noise and busyness. Its diversity and stability are sources of wonder and strength to all who understand. This is land in the bank for generations yet unborn who will want an unspoiled earth. And then nobody with Scenic Rivers Association is sure if this ever got published, but he wrote an article that he proposed for the newsletter. I remember when there was no Tennessee Scenic Rivers Association, and Tennessee was becoming the best damn state in the USA. Then when he was in college, he was an anthropology major in college. Um, January of, I guess it would be 1961, John Kennedy was not yet inaugurated, but he wrote him a letter. Why not, right? I write to you this letter in exasperation, but with all sincerity. Two ideas have troubled me, and I would submit them to you. Briefly, they are: In picking the experts to work within your administration, don't forget the anthropologists. I'm not sure that Kennedy had an anthropologist in his cabinet. Also, why can't we have a government-sanctioned youth group for peace? Which, of course, we do have, thanks to John Kennedy. Here's one of his letters that I couldn't bypass. I had to put in a long, long letter, and this is a little piece out of the middle of it. Your emotional charge that people like me who oppose the Tellico Dam have rocks in their heads prompts this long letter to you. As the parks naturalist for the Tennessee Department of Conservation, I have traveled extensively across Tennessee and know its environmental problems. I found that TVA is nature's worst enemy in this state. See, he did not mince words. I wonder if TVA's Tellico-type progress continues, whether we will have a state. Here's a piece that he wrote for a group of I don't know if it was federal highway or state highway people on scenic corridors and aesthetic conservation. Truly, we might say that conservation leads to aesthetics, and I think that's worth thinking about. For conservation is wise use. Efficiency is the opposite of waste, which yields ugliness. We do not know the real cost of waste and ugliness, but we do know that accidents are more on highways that are ugly. The competition for the driver's concern from ugly distractions that drain rather than recharge, that irritate rather than soothe, is something we're just beginning to understand. We should look to the sources of our inspiration, which are the works of God and nature's manifestation about us. We cannot rid ourselves of nature's influence because we are human animals. We are bound to the earth and by the same physical laws as any other creature, and we need nature more than nature needs us. You cannot rid man of nature any more than you can rid nature of man. So here he is. This is the next to last slide. Another comment on parks. I believe that parks and other protected places hold the hope of the world. The preservation of these wild places as sacred ground is probably the best thing this country has ever contributed. We're busy fighting wars, but parks are great reservoirs of peace. I'm very optimistic. It's hard to be optimistic these days, but it's really important to support these parks, and I'm sure that a number of you are members of Friends of at least one state park, and it is so important that we support these special places. The Mack Prichard Foundation is the group that put out this book, and it's $15 on Amazon. I encourage you to look at the website, mackprichard.com, which is actually under construction. I got an email today about some links that they're trying to fix. But one of the things on there is a collection of hundreds of, or maybe thousands of slides that Mack took and have been scanned and are on there. I want you also there's a contact you can fill out a contact form and get on the newsletter list, which I think you might like to do. Mack's birthday is March 31st, and every year Mack Prichard Day is celebrated in the state. Trails and Trilliums, which is what the Friends of the South Cumberland Parks puts on in Beersheba Springs. This year is April 10 through 12, and we are having a special tribute to Mack at Trails and Trilliums this year. We are going to have a panel on land conservation in his honor, and we're hoping to get the traveling exhibit. There's an exhibit that was put together by TDEC that travels from park to park, and we're hoping to get that at least for trails and trilliums. But thank you very much. Um, hope you enjoyed this. I enjoyed sharing.
Mary, this was exceptional, and what a person.
Yep.
Um, I'm sure not maybe many of the people here tonight knew of Mack. I have to say I did not, not being from Tennessee, and boy, I'm inspired by his view and his sensibility toward wild places. I mean, we all know how valuable they are, but he just had a special insight into their beauty and value. And
Yep.
my goodness, the things he accomplished, it's amazing. This was terrific.
Well, that's what happens when you're driven. I mean, really driven. And he really, really was.
Mary, would you turn on your video,
I
please?
would love, let's see if I can figure out. Oh, I see.
There
Yep,
you are.
there
There
I
you
am.
are.
Thank you.
Sure. I have a Mac story that I told Tim about
Oh, good.
earlier. That has nothing to do with wild places or plants, and but I think it'll tell you something about who he was. I worked at the Cumberland Science Museum as education curator uh, up in about 3 years, and in 1980 I decided to the person I'd been going with for about 7 years that lived in California, we decided to get married. And I had my last day at work on a Thursday, and then my fiance flew here to Nashville. And then we were going to drive to North Carolina to get married at my parents' home on Thursday. He flew in and then said he couldn't go through with it. So I had my last day of my work. And additionally, I had 3 horses that had to be put down in North Carolina that day that I had beloved horses. I was very depressed. The fellow
Mm,
that I was to marry went back to LA, and at some point the next couple of weeks, I talked to Mac, and he listened, and then he said, "Come on, I want you to come with me, and let's go downtown." And where he took me was to a church downtown that served homeless people. So I stood there and served meals to homeless people, their midday meal, and my perspective on my own troubles was changed, altered.
mm, mm,
And anyway, I just thought that was he didn't preach to me, he didn't say anything. He just said, "Come with me." And I'm very grateful all that happened, but it was painful at the time, of course. But
yeah.
anyway, I'm so grateful to him and what he did in that moment, just to give me another understanding of where my life was in relation to other people's troubles.
Wow.
Mine were
Wow.
minor.
Well, but he didn't poo-poo it. He just kind of
Nope,
helped you to
he just
see.
took me to see.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well,
I'll never forget that. Yeah.
mm. Well, I think, it's this experiential learning, which I'm sure you did a whole lot of teaching at the museum. I mean, that's kind of what it is in real life, really. Uh, I remember standing out on what was sort of like a prow of a boat. This was actually a great big house in Belmead that had a deck that went way out into the woods. And at a fundraising, trying to raise money for the park. And we went out there with Mac, and he said, "Let's just see if there are any barred owls out here." He started calling them in, and sure enough, there were plenty of them. And um, just experiences, actual experiences are the way to learn, the way to teach, for sure. Mm, that's a beautiful story.
And a quick follow-up, the man that's singing upstairs and practicing his songs that I've been married to for 30, almost 36 years, our first date was on the hardest placed trail that I could find. The first time I ever was with him, and it was the Fiery Gizzard Trail, and we did walk 12 miles, and he
Wow.
passed my test that time. Mm.
Yeah, that's
Mary, there was one slide there near the end, and the people were standing in front of a building, and it had the letters TNPS on it, and it looked like it would have been, well, maybe we were founded when, in 1977? Karen knows. I get 77 and 78 mixed up, and
78. Well, sort of, they got together the first time in December of 77,
okay.
but our logo has 78 on it. So we say 78 now.
So it was well within Mack's time. So I'm wondering, like, what was that someone wrote in black letters on a white building TNPS with that?
really.
It's in one of the slides. Yeah.
Oh, I'll have to go back and look. I didn't notice it at all.
I don't think we've ever had our own building or any place that we called our physical location other than a mailbox.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh gosh. Yeah.
I think
No
it was black and
telling.
white photograph, I believe.
it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you noticed it too, huh?
Yes.
Well, I'll have to go back and look. I
It was
didn't
near the very end there. It was
pay any
either,
attention.
yeah.
Mm, that's interesting. Don't know.
Mary, thank you very much for sharing this information. It was very inspirational.
Well, thank you,
I've
Mitchell.
enjoyed the Fire Gizzard and Foster Falls and that whole area many times with my wife Nancy. And I'll not see it the same way next time I go. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you. Thanks for asking me to do it. I enjoyed it.
And we're getting comments in the chat thanking Mary. Susanna says, "What a wonderful story. Thank you for sharing." And Nora says, "Mary, thank you. So enjoyed the retrospective on Mack and hearing about his foundation. Thanks for all you do to keep his legacy alive." Nora Beck. Yes, and I agree. And I will say that Mary said, "Oh, don't talk all about all my accomplishments and all the things I've done." But obviously, you can see why she is sought after and so
Yeah,
successful. And this was a really nice presentation.
yeah, thanks. Thank you. I enjoyed doing it.
All right. Well, everyone, thank you very much for being here. And one little thing I will mention is, and Mary brought it up, is that the TNPS is having its annual conference in May of 2026 at Henry Horton State Park. And that's going to be, we haven't sent out the save the date yet, but I think it's okay to say it's going to be Friday, May 15 through Sunday, May 17. So for all of you people here tonight, you just put that in your back pocket to think about. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here, and we will see you again next month on the third Tuesday for our next TNPS presentation. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Mary.
All right.